This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. For our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Michael Morelli. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Michael Morelli. Michael is the Associate Professor of Theology and Ethics at Northwest College and Seminary and Acts Seminaries. Both are affiliates of Trinity Western University. He's also an adjunct professor of theology at Trinity's Religious Studies and Nursing Schools. He has a PhD in theological ethics from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, and is the author of Theology, Ethics, and Technology in the work of Jacques Ellul and Paul Virilio, A Nascent Theological Tradition, and editor of Desert, Wilderness, Wasteland, and Word, a new essay by Jacques Ellul and 5 critical engagements. So thanks for joining me today, Michael. It's great to reconnect.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Andrew. I am so pumped to be here.
We met at Theology Beer Camp, which is becoming more of a intro for me with guests because, I've met really cool people at Theology Beer Camp, and, you and I just started talking that first night. And yeah, it just was really great connecting with you and learning. And then you were speaking on AI, and I'm like, oh, AI, like there's a lot here that needs to be discussed. So here we are.
Yeah. I remember it didn't take long for us to start talking about food and beverage, and I think that's why we became fast friends. But paradoxically, due to our appreciation of slow food.
Right.
Fast friends, slow food. Maybe that's
the title of this podcast. Fast friends. Yes.
I just did it.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Love it. Yes. So I invited you on because you actually had a podcast with Trip Fuller and Paul Hord right around Christmas about AI and the incarnation, which was like, oh, wow, this is the most beautiful Advent reflection, for me during that season. It was really,
oh, thank you.
And so that just triggered me like, oh, what's AI and food, and how can we talk about it, and what might food do to help us counter what AI might be promoting. And so before we even get into food, which we want to get to, like, when we say AI, like, what are we talking about, and help the listeners sort of situate what this is?
Yeah, that's a great way to start. Is what do we mean when we say AI? And there's lots of ways to define it, and I think the jury is still out, as it were, in terms of how to define it. And I like to say that at this point, what we think of when we think of AI or artificial intelligence is actually closer to machine learning, where it's a technology that uses data inputs, information that is fed to it, and reads it at an incredibly fast and deep level in order to output information. But we've moved now to another stage, I would say, where it's not just information, it's actually performance of tasks, and it's actually generation of content based on the processing of existing information or content. Now, the other layer is a lot of that process from the start to finish is now presented in a more personalized way. So as this technology is working, it is performing a personality. So you don't just, go to Google and type in, a search for something, and then it gives you the results that it thinks you're looking for. You make a search or you input a prompt, but it's like you're talking to a person or some kind of being, a sentient being with a personality that's helping you along the way as it's doing it. And so that's where the artificial intelligence piece comes in. And there's, back and forth about whether or not that can actually be defined as intelligence.
Hmm.
Right. So if we're going to go with like a really strict definition of artificial intelligence, we're probably talking about machine sentience, right? Like a level of consciousness, personality, awareness, critical thinking, creative, processing that would be similar to the way that humans do all of those things. And so, are we there yet? I personally do not think so, but there are other people who would say if we're not already there, we're pretty darn close. And some people make the point, well, if you look, say, at ransomware bots, once they're released into the world, this is Beth Singler. She does a lot of great work on AI and religion. She would say, well, once ransomware bots are released into the sort of online universe, they kind of act autonomously,
Hmm.
right? They will infiltrate your computer system, steal some files that you don't want the world to see, hold them for ransom, and talk to you like they're like a kidnapper.
Right.
So this is the kind of gray area that we're in, is the processing power has reached a point where whether or not it can actually be defined as sentience, they actually perform it pretty darn well.
Oh.
So that's kind of where we're at. But I talked to a computer programmer once. This is the last thing I'll say. He said, you know, we're not at that point where, when you watch a sci-fi movie and you see robots walking around and they're kind of functioning like humans in terms of consciousness. He's like, we're not there yet. Some people say, well, maybe they are, and we just don't know yet. But as far as I can tell, and I might be proven wrong, we're not there yet.
Okay, good. I'm glad. So I don't have
Yes,
to.
I would say the same. I'd say let's figure out this whole what it means to be a human thing first before we start creating new beings, or at least trying to create new beings. Like let's
Yeah.
focus on sorting out our basic humanity and caring for each other as humans, full stop, before we start working on inventing new beings. But that's just me. Call
Right.
me a traditionalist.
Right. Yeah. Because that's the extreme AI that but we're also dealing with AI, within our jobs, within, if you're a teacher, which you are, or a parent, your kids are trying to figure out, students are trying to figure out AI and how to get around stuff, and using AI to short circuit, and cheat, I guess, really, and so we use AI, and yet I think there's a lack of critical reflection. And so why, even beyond a sentient being idea, what does the normal person need to think about as they engage with AI that might be helpful, you know, one, to maybe help themselves, but also help kids or students think through these ideas?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is that it's quite widespread, and it was probably more present in our day-to-day lives than we knew. Um, and now it's becoming more obvious because of advances in the technologies. And of course, too, the marketing and the stories that are being told about those technologies, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just an average website, or you think about factories and automation, right? Like those are all technologies that are using this basic machine learning um, uh, to perform tasks, right? To process information and spit out information that you're looking for, and or build stuff, right? So it's been around, but I think now it's just kind of reached a stage where we're seeing it more, and there's more access to it,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that's kind of like, that's similar to computers, right? The
Yeah.
first computer, filled up a big room and only a big corporation could afford it, right? And now it's like, well, so many more people have access to computers.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of reached that sort of critical mass in mainstream market. Um, but I think for me, I do teach, and I do run into students who use generative, software or AI or ChatGPT to do their assignments. And I kind of have well, first of all, I say, if you're going to use it, like, go for it. Just tell me that you're using it, because I'm not going to get mad if somebody uses a search engine or a journal database.
Right.
Like, it can be useful to help you retrieve information, but hopefully you're analyzing it critically, because it's getting better, but it's been shown time and again that it'll just make up quotes from authors that don't actually exist.
Right.
Or, it'll create a bibliography of resources, and, I'll click on them and it takes you to a web page that's totally different, or just like the link doesn't exist. So, it's kind of like, just because these technologies exist, hopefully critical thinking and analyzing your sources doesn't go out the window. But because of the ease of use and the apparent trustworthiness of it, and kind of the allure of this technology that's so personalized and seemingly effective, unfortunately, that level of critical thinking goes out the window. But I mean, unfortunately, look at the last 10, 15 years. I mean, we didn't need AI to not have critical thinking about online media. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
Like, this is not an anomaly. This is not a sort of bug in the way that we engage with online media. Like, this is a feature.
Right.
The second thing I'll say is, when I find out that a student has used it, I will connect with them, and I'll just say, look, we got software that scans this, and yours was flagged. Let's have a conversation. And I say, if you just tell me that you've used it, then that's strike one, and I'll give you a chance to resubmit with no penalty. And I say, here's why I think it's important that you take this as an opportunity to reflect on what's happened and why you might want to resubmit and not use these tools. I tell them, you cannot shortcut the process of personal development and formation. Like, you can perform that process, but the whole point of reading and synthesizing that research and reflecting on that research and then crafting an essay or doing a presentation or doing anything creative, in this case, it's knowledge production. It's not just about the end product. It's actually about the process that gets you to the end product. Like, I actually believe it changes lives, because it changed my life, and it changed a lot of other people's lives too. That's why we actually do it. And so I tell them, like, this isn't just about finishing something and getting a grade and then, hopefully getting a job. If you actually view this as an opportunity for transformation, this actually might change your life. And I think the problem is, though, from a higher education perspective, is for too long, academics have assumed that everybody knows that, right? Just because I like reading, just because I like writing essays, I assume that everybody just magically knows why you would spend time doing this. And I just realized with AI, it just sort of pushes to the forefront. I'm like, oh, I need to be very upfront with students about why you would take the time to do this. If the best answer I have to give is because this is just what you do at school, it's like, why wouldn't you use AI? Right. And this connects to food. I mean, we'll get into that. Yeah. But it's the same thing. It's like, well, if you just want sort of protein and energy, why wouldn't you just eat some cottage cheese? Right. But it's actually the process of producing a meal also does something to you before you even sit down and eat it. Right. Right. Yep. That's the analogy there for me. So.
Love it. And just to like to go back to what you said about just the prevalence of it, like, we're recording this the day after Super Bowl, and there were multiple AI commercials. I think of one remember one from Google AI that like it's this mom and the son talking about their home and like, hey, can you put a bed there or paint, show my walls in blue, and then can you show a garden in our yard and um, and it's preying, that might be too strong of a word, preying on these like emotions of like, oh, see, it's just benign. Um, and in some respects, there are some aspects maybe where it is benign, but to just wholeheartedly accept it as benign without critically thinking about what it does to our humanity puts us in a weird spot, right? And so, um, yeah, it was just weird watching those commercials, reflecting on knowing that I was going to have a conversation with you today, and being like, hey, wait, what are they actually doing? you know, um, to us to try to get us to accept that, hey, no, this is just part of who we are now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point that we're maybe starting to see. We're past the point of, the proclamations of, you know, the singularity and look at this achievement and look at all these wonderful things that we can do, to more
Yeah,
benign
right.
uh, uh, ads and rhetoric and storytelling and aesthetics to get us to sort of integrate it into our daily lives. And the first thing that jumps into my mind is who benefits the more we integrate these things into our lives, like what data is being generated as we use these tools to see what color we might want our walls to be, or our garden that we're envisioning, having some different sort of versions that we can test before we go to Home Depot or
Right.
wherever
Yeah.
to buy these things. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure Home Depot or whatever hardware store wants to know that we're thinking about this, so it can start
Yeah.
firing ads our way, right?
Right.
And that already happens, but this is, at a more targeted and probably more aggressive level. But yeah, I mean, I think it also, the second thing I would say is that, and Alul says this over and over, as do other thinkers about technology, is one of the stories we tell about it is that it's neutral, right?
Yeah.
It's not good or evil. It's not, positive or negative. It's how we use it that really matters, right? We're in control. It's kind of like, a more benign argument when it comes to guns, of like, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And you're like, have you ever held one of these things?
Yeah.
It feels awesome. It you feel like the guy in Die Hard, or the Terminator. Like like there's something about the design of this tool that actually produces a reaction in you, so it does shape you.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, like it's just unarguable that something as banal as a phone with computing processing like we have, like these things do shape us. Now, some of those are positive effects, but some of them are negative. And so how do we start to view the technologies that have really been integrated into our day-to-day lives, and the ones that we might integrate? How
Mm-hmm.
do we actually think deeper about the ways in which they're forming us, for better, for worse? Because they're not benign, even if the ad is trying to convince us that it is.
Right. And that's so important because, yeah, too often I think we just assume, well, okay, it's the newest technology. People are good. I'm just going to accept that, nobody's creating this for nefarious reasons. But and maybe that's true, but again, like, again, who's benefiting, who's getting richer from this, and who's being exploited um, from this? And like, the prime example is, Tesla had to delay their self-driving cars because, when they developed the model, they only developed it to recognize white males. And so like they would like,
That's so unsurprising.
right. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So like, when they started testing it, you know, people of color were like, it wasn't recognizing them as human
Yeah.
because the system in which it was developed only took into account the developer's mode of being versus, okay, how do we make sure it recognizes different skin tones and different genders and make sure that everybody's safe versus only, you know, me.
Yeah, and that's a point that's been made about AI, software and technologies, is that the information outputs are only as good as the information inputs, and the information being generated that to feed to these machines are generated by humans who are inherently biased.
Yeah.
So we tend to view, again, technology as this neutral analytical thing, and even if it were, the people that are prompting and giving it the data and designing it do have biases, and those creep in. So that's a great example. There's been stories about real estate companies or banks trying to decide who they're going to give mortgages to, or give bank accounts to, and because of the biases that are in the information, if you're not white and middle class, then you get denied a
Yeah.
mortgage, for
Right.
example. There's also stuff about crime as well, right? Determining who might be an offender or reoffender, and that information typically is very biased towards people who are not white as well. So yeah, I think that is kind of the deeper reality that's going on, despite the trust that we put in these technologies.
And then to nuance it, because I think it's easy just, to become binary in our thinking. Well, AI is bad. I must not use it. Like, full confession, I use AI as I'm producing my podcast to help create summaries and to help give ideas about, you know, titles and blog, and social posts, not blog posts, social posts, just to help, you know, make it a little more convenient. So I don't, you know, preparing for this podcast has had me rethinking, okay, what is this beneficial? Like, should I be doing this? Or, you know, but there's also good aspects where AI is being used. And, I was reading a book by Sam Cass, who was, the Obama's nutritional advisor. And he talks about Sarah Menker, who's a global food activist, and and a global technologist, and she ran models of like, okay, when are we going to run into a crisis of food production given our climate crisis? When is the need for calories, or the number of calories needed, not going to be able to be produced by the world? And so she's running predictive models, in a very expert contained way of like, okay, what are we running up against? And so I think there are some instances when AI in the right hands of experts, and I think they're even doing this in cancer research and protein folding from what I've heard. Like, there are ways in which this can be done to benefit us and to help us, you know, come to conclusions quicker than we could otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. You know, people like Jacques Ellul and Paul Virilio, a lot of these 20th century continental philosophical, sociological, theological, anthropological writers,
Yeah.
typically are labeled as technological pessimists, and I get why. Because they are quite critical. They don't write off technology wholesale, although they're pretty suspicious. And I do this in the book that I wrote, which was based on my dissertation research. But I situate them within the post World War II context in Europe,
Hmm.
where they witnessed atrocities, and a lot of those were made possible by technologies that, yes, technologies of war and weapons and these sorts of things, but they also saw firsthand radio, cinema, and other sort of mass media technologies being used to indoctrinate people into really awful ideologies, and then all the atrocities of the Second World War. So that really scared them, and that is what causes their writing to have the tone that it does. And I think we're seeing the prophetic nature of that work. But I've also gone on a journey in the last 6-7 years, um, having to say, okay, like, it's really helpful to think critically about this, but I also actually started to feel like I needed to have a bit more imagination to think about constructive uses towards which some of these technologies could be put. And I just think that is a good way to go. But I often use the analogy of, like, when you get your driver's license, you have to learn the rules. You have to have somebody who's experienced teach you how to drive. Maybe you go to driver's education, and then you have multiple tests and regulations and licensing stages, at least where I am in Canada. You have different stages in order to verify, beyond a reasonable doubt, that you can operate this technology that is helpful, but also can really hurt yourself and other people.
Right.
And I think, for a lot of these things, we just don't have that.
Mm-mm.
So my answer isn't like more regulation, but maybe the answer is like more formation and wisdom on how to use these tools responsibly, where we're like, yeah, here are the constructive uses for these things, but also like, here's how dangerous they are too. And I think in our sort of North American, context, we're so focused on the positives that we just kind of, view anybody bringing up but what about the negatives as kind of like, oh, you're just a Luddite, you're backwards, you're whatever. And so it's like, how do we have this fuller view? So we're conscious both of the good, but also just how bad it can get.
Thank you for bringing us to this fuller picture, because that's we as we were thinking, or as I was thinking about this podcast, of like, okay, how do we situate AI and this technology into this sort of modern moment, but then also how do we think in the wisdom tradition of our Christianity and the church and all the people that have come before us, of like, okay, how do we actually think about what it means to be human? Because really, I think AI forces us to ask, like, okay, what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to be creaturely, and to live a life on this earth. And so, yeah, like in this modern moment we find ourselves in, like, I think part of what you were saying is, oh, you're a Luddite, you're just bringing us down. Come on, get on board. It's all about more. It's all about acceleration, accumulation, in this whirlpool we find ourselves in, just barely trying to keep up. And, for me, Hartmut Rosa's explanatory power of acceleration and resonance has been really helpful for me to think about modernity. And so, yeah, like how do you situate this technological moment within modernity and late modernity?
Yeah. So I'll start with the wisdom piece, and maybe we can get to that later. But that is where I landed. And one of the challenges about that comes with talking about technology or writing about it, as I have, is like, how do you talk and write about it? Because it's so ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Like when we're talking about technology, like, what is it? And
Right.
right. And typically, we'll refer to specific technologies, and usually it's the latest ones that are raising all these sorts of questions. And a lot of times, it's like, we think these questions are novel, right? Like, never before have we asked this question before. Never before has humanity had to confront whatever. And you're like, well, maybe sometimes that's true, but honestly, like, if we just drill down a little bit, we actually start to discover that people have been asking questions in similar ways, maybe different forms for different reasons, for ages. And so that's the move that I realized I needed to make, is like, let's actually turn to humans and say, without humans, we don't get technology, right? And of course, our modern moment is very technological. And this is what I said in my book. I'm like, we're talking about technology, we're talking about modernity, because the type of modernity we know can't seem to be what it is without technology, right? If you ask somebody what's the modern world, they'd probably say, well, it started with the Industrial Revolution, and here we are with the technologies that we have, and so on, and it's afforded us this quality of life, and it's raised these opportunities, but also these challenges for us, and that's inherently tied to technology.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the where we are. And so I just kind of say, like, well, what does it mean to be human in such a world? And this is where the question of wisdom comes in for me as a theologian, is like, we need wisdom for this. Because that's a question that's been posed in numerous ways throughout the ages, is like, what is it to live well? What is the way to life? What is the way to death?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but in terms of our particular moment, this theme of acceleration, I think, is really important. I read a fair amount of Rosa. At the time, I was reading a lot of Paul Virilio, because Paul Virilio has written a lot on speed
Hmm.
and acceleration. And Rosa actually engages with Virilio, and rightly so, because both would say that, if you look at sort of the history of technology, it's like ever increasing acceleration for the purposes of accumulation of a number of things. It could be power, it could be wealth, it could be resources, what have you. But we've reached a point of like super acceleration, and we're addicted to it. And it's this paradoxical reality of like, we're moving faster than we ever have, but also inertia sets in.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like when you fly on a plane, for 13 hours, and you arrive in a new place. Like 13 hours is long, but that's still pretty fast to get to some of the places that you go.
Right.
And then you get there, and you have jet lag, right? Your body needs to catch up with the
Right.
speed of that trip.
Yeah.
And once you get into things like social media, it compresses time and space to the point where people all over the world in different time zones and in different spaces kind of meet online in this real time space. And it's everywhere and nowhere. Right?
Right.
It's we call it real time, but it's hyper real time. That's Baudrillard. And that creates a kind of jet lag, and it creates a kind of collision. Actually, it creates a kind of violence, right? So
Yeah.
to give you an example, is like, it takes one ideologue who's leading the most powerful nation, in the world, to send out one tweet, and it sends the stock markets like, up or down, or it sends like other leaders, into a frenzy to respond. Right? That's a phenomenon of acceleration and inertia and collision and violence that is pretty significant, which is precisely why a lot of us, if we're wrapped up in the news cycle, the breaking news cycle, it kind of feels like we're getting whiplash, kind of feels like we're getting burnt out. And then there's some people who are just like, I got to check out. I can't handle this anymore. Like, that is the end result of our addiction to ever increasing speed through our technologies.
No, and I think Hartmut, with this aggression that you talk about, like, it comes back to like, we want to control, and in our effort to control things, we meet the world as in aggression, because like, we're going to battle for, our ideas, our mode of being, over and against anybody who might get in the way, whether that's the created world or another person.
Yeah. And I think he's right there. I mean, this is my aha moment. And I mean, this we get this from Foucault as well. It's all about power, man. It's all about power.
Yeah.
Like, the way that he ends Discipline and Punish, the ending to that book, just like, I think describes this modern condition so well and so cryptically. He's like, if you just listen, you can hear like the roar of this battle raging, and it's this like battle for power. Right? Money is important. Okay. Yeah. But honestly, what we've discovered is that power is what really matters, because it's like, as long as people think you're a billionaire, that's all that matters. You don't actually need to have it.
Yeah.
You just need them to think that you're a billionaire, and people will like give you power.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think so. I say we love technology because it offers us power. And I just say, well, watch out, because it demands blood. Right. It demands your blood or somebody else's, or both. And, as a Christian, I'm like, I'm very anti-violence.
Yep. You and I both. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think it goes back to, I was reading someplace else about, we're in this capitalism of influencers. Like, that power, the power of an influencer is to dictate what is said or not said, or what is believed or not believed, and to influence the trajectory of humanity, whether that's, you know, religious communities or the global economy, you know. And again, it's this give and take, right? Because like you and I both have podcasts. Like you want to build a platform that is sustainable, that, you know, this isn't a cheap endeavor. It requires time and resources. And
Yeah.
I do it for the love, because I love connecting with people like you and having these conversations. Maybe it's just for me, and hopefully the listeners appeal, you know. But so it's like this weird, like, you know, I'm torn, you know, of like, okay, I want to expose people to wisdom and these ideas, and hopefully helping us think better. But at the same time, the influencer trap is real, and like it does demand something that I am I willing to give myself to it.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I referenced this earlier in terms of that journey I was describing of imagining, you know, constructive uses for um, things like, you know, social media and podcasting. And, you know, I was decidedly off that for a very long time. I used to work in communications, actually,
Hmm.
and I kind of burnt out. And that kind of prompted the research that I did into technology. But I kind of took a very long break from it. And I really kind of fell into like, well, I don't need to be on there, and, you know, I don't need to, you know, fall into that sort of stuff. Like I'm trying to be an influencer and platforming myself. And then, um, you know, I would say just over a year and a half ago, I just realized, whether I like it or not, I am in higher education. And part of my job is inviting people to spend money to come and learn at the institution I am a part of.
Mhm.
And um, we're seeing declining enrollment in universities and like theological schools.
Yep.
There's decreased institutional trust all over the board. And there's increasing trust in individuals who seem to have a grasp of the situation, or know the truth, or have some wisdom to offer. Whether or not that's reliable or not, we are in a moment where people are much more likely to trust an individual than they are an institution.
Wow.
And so I said to myself, I'm like, look, if I want to actually have a job as a professor, you know, in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and I hope to, because I love doing what I'm doing, I need to actually share a little bit about myself so that
Hmm.
people can see who I am and what I'm about, and then figure out whether or not they'd want to come hear me speak about something, let alone, you know, pay money to come do a whole 2-year program or 3
Right.
or 4-year program,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I can gripe about that, or I can be like, well, this is, whether I like it or not, like this is a part of my job
Yeah.
now, if I want to still have it.
Hmm.
And that kind of pushed me to think, well, like, if that's the case, then how do I do this in a way that doesn't fall into this platform building influencer trend? Like, I would like to influence people, but I would like to influence people in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm pretending to be something I'm not.
Right.
I would like to influence people in a way that doesn't play into an algorithm that rewards me for talking shit about other people.
Hmm.
Right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, because like the you get rewarded for mean things and like offensive things.
Yeah.
And short things, right? Like my friends are like, Michael, your posts are too long. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do some 30-second ones, but I can't help myself. Like,
Yeah.
like what we're talking about has to be more than 30 seconds. And I don't care if the algorithm doesn't reward me for that. I'm like, the 300 versus the 1,500 people who see it, maybe that meets them on a day where they needed to hear that.
Hmm.
And I go away thinking, well, maybe that's doing something for, you know, not a massive group of people, but it's doing something.
Yeah.
And so like I think it's great where there are people like you and hopefully me, who are, and others, right?
Yeah.
Who are saying like, it's possible to be on here, you know, the podcast sphere, doing what we're doing, and do it in a way that doesn't sort of just go with the flow, that
Hmm.
we're swimming upstream, but it's actually leading to something of value. And I think it does. I think it
Hmm.
does.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, like decreased trust in institutions has produced this phenomenon where we are more likely to trust individuals with microphones and social media platforms. And I think there's positives to that, but as we're also seeing, there are very real negatives and dangers to it as well.
No, I really appreciate the word, just because, as one engaging with a podcast, I'm always trying, at least hopefully, to think about, okay, what do I want to present as a way of being in the world that might counteract some of the trends we see. And obviously for me, that, everything revolves around the table, for like when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And so for me, when I, as a former chef and as a person who loves food, everything's a table, which isn't always good, because I don't think the table is the solution to is the answer to every question, but it's
a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Right.
I am, I don't have a lot of moves actually in terms of like my theology. Like for me, it's like it all leads to a few things.
Yeah.
Actually, like talking,
Right.
preaching or prayer, water, baptism,
Mm-hmm.
and then eating,
Yeah.
communion,
Mm-hmm.
and resting, Sabbath, and then serving people.
Yeah.
Right. Which and all of the things that precede the serving people, especially people in need, who Jesus says he is, all of the things that precede the service actually form you in the type of person who serves well and
Yeah.
receives well. So, it's like, I've got no new answers.
Right.
So, and I can say, for people listening, like I've met Andrew, we've hung out in person over the course of a couple of days, and like, I don't see a difference between Andrew in person and Andrew on screen. And I remember I used to work with a pastor who said that to me. He said, Michael, when you're up front, I want you to be the same person up front that you are when you're getting coffee after. And I think that should be the goal for all of us, is like, how do we have that alignment between who we are in person and who we are when there's a camera on or we're talking in front of an audience?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And, so the table. So I think, this is where I think, this creaturely life that we're called to, one that's rooted in creation, I think we always have to come back to this fact that, the Bible opens in a garden, full of delight and beauty and food and everything that was pleasing to the eye. And so, like, as you've thought about the food and table, like, how do you see the table? Like, maybe start with the church, because I think then that informs our smaller tables. But like, how does the table operate to maybe cut against the grain of AI and what AI is asking us to become?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. And I could answer it in a number of ways, but I was thinking about this in preparation for this conversation. And one of the things that I love about, and I referenced, the sacraments, right? Ordinances, depending on what tradition you are a part of, like, is God points to water, bread, and wine and says, these are things other than what they look like. And so, right, the water one is a bit more sort of like, yes, there's the cleansing piece, but also baptism is like a representation of dying and being raised to new life in Jesus.
Right.
Before that word goes out, who looks at that and is like, this represents the dying and raising again of a first century Jewish rabbi who said he was the Son of God. Like, right? But the word causes us to see the water as representative of it, and perhaps even mediating that, right? So it opens a door to a reality beyond what we see, materially. And in the same way, the communion table does that. Is here's everyday bread, and here's wine. That's can be everyday, but also a little bit more ceremonial or celebratory. And even in themselves, these are wonderful things that evoke all sorts of memories and feelings and so on and thoughts. But I'm also going to tie them to the sacrifice of the Son of God, and it's going to mediate that reality in some way. But it's not just going to help you remember that, and it's not just going to mediate that. It's also going to open the door to this God that actually meets you in the here and now and invites you to sit at the table and eat with Him. And it also gestures to a future reality too, in terms of a banquet, a wedding banquet, where we all gather and celebrate and eat together and laugh and sing. And as it does that, it starts to train, form, and perhaps even transform us into the types of people who don't just look at water in the baptismal tank or fountain, or the elements on the table when we gather as the church. It also starts to shape how we look at bread on the table in the morning. It also starts to shape the way that we don't even just look at wine or grape juice. It shapes the way that we look at our coffee. It shapes the way that we look at our tea. It shapes the way we look at our beer. It shapes the way that we look at our water. And then we start to see the reality behind the reality, where opposites attract, right?
Yeah.
Like attracts like, but also opposites attract. And that to me connects to the church is this is the magic of communion, is like a whole bunch of people that would never get together were it not for this, all of a sudden getting together and eating. And then hopefully that's happening in our homes too.
Right.
And so with AI, it doesn't seem to be able to create those types of paradoxical connections, right? It's just connecting dots at this point of this connects to this, that connects to that, and it's just more straightforward. And we think it's wrong if it's giving us unlikely connections, right? We want the clearest, most airtight connections. So there's no symbol, there's no metaphor, and there's therefore not the mediation or revelatory capacity of symbols and metaphors. And so that's where I think I would answer it in terms of the AI conversation is, for certain things, it's going to be really great in terms of well, I'm in a new town and where's some great restaurants to go to. Okay, maybe, but it might also just help to ask a local or whatever. But it's these things, the table forms unlikely relationships and connections that wouldn't make sense otherwise. And I think that's the chief distinction. I think that's why it's so incredibly important.
I love that phrase. It makes connections that otherwise wouldn't have happened, and I recently recorded a conversation with Paul and Billy Horde, and we were talking about the Eucharist and that it is this disgusting act in which we are taking in, we are cannibalistic, at its root.
It's in the Bible. Jesus says, he's like, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you're not getting into the kingdom of heaven. And everyone's like, this is a hard saying. And he's like, oh no, you misheard me. He doesn't say that. He's like, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. Right.
It's weird.
Right. Yeah. It's really food at its core is us taking in something and being transformed by it. When I eat, I take in the substance and it becomes who I am, and so I take in Jesus, and hopefully Jesus takes root, in some small respects, a little yeast at a time, a little bit. But then also, as I, like you said, the unlikely connections, as I celebrate the Eucharist, it's not just me and Jesus, it's me and Michael, it's me and Paul being taken in each other and us becoming each other and part of each other because we are one body, and that mysterious elements, of what it is, it is crazy. Sure, AI can give us a recipe to make bread or to figure out how to make grapes into wine, but it is the human element and the relational element and the communal element and the ecological element that actually have more power in making great wine than any machine ever could.
I oh man, like my mind goes in so many different directions, but I'll start with communion and then I'll go to the second part. Yeah, I don't know if I ever got it published, but I talk about um the revelatory capacities of communion, and I say like, and I got a little bit of this of your conversation with the one, I can't remember his name, the fellow about the biblical theology of wine.
Yeah. Yes.
um I was thinking about this, and that I realized like the way in which your church community receives communion not only discloses like the presence of Christ, but it also discloses your church's understanding of the presence of Christ. So
Hmm.
if it's everybody gets the little plastic cups and
Right.
whatever, and we receive that in a more passive sense, like we don't even have to get up and walk forward, and then like what do we walk forward to, or even if it's a tray that we like pass down the side, like all of these things are communicating the status of the body, right?
Right.
In the same way that people say, if you want to know the church's theology, don't just listen to the sermon or the homily, like look at the songs and listen to the songs that they're singing. All these are disclosing our status. And I just want to say, and if anybody listening can prove me wrong, fine, but I'm like, and I go to a church that is like this. The churches that tend to receive communion more passively tend to be types of churches that don't regularly eat together.
Hmm.
Right? I say this all the time. You want an indicator of church health? Here's one. During the week, do people in your congregation eat together? And when they eat together, do they all look alike, talk the same, have the same background, come from the same class? Because like eating together, I think, is an indication of the health of a community. And different people who wouldn't otherwise eat together, eating together is like, now we're in Acts 2 territory.
Right.
Right. And so I think there are holistic connections between the way in which we receive communion and the way in which we do or don't eat together. And when we do eat together, who's eating? I mean, this is Paul getting mad at the Corinthian church, right? People are sick and dying because rich people are having a drunken feast where they're stuffing themselves, and the poor people aren't included, and they're showing up starving. And that's why the body is sick, right?
But
yeah,
Michael, church growth movement told us that likeness and sameness is what's going to cause the church to grow and to explode and to take over the world. And come on, we're going against the grain here. If you ask me to eat with people not like myself, whereas all my seminary education, the church growth movement, hey, if you want to grow a church, gather like with like.
And I think that's a great response. And I would say absolutely, you can have quantity or quality, but pick one,
right?
Because you can't necessarily have both at the same time. And this drive towards accumulation and faster accumulation, which is very much at the heart of the church growth movement, is going to drive you away from the quality connection and diverse connection.
Right.
And I think we're seeing the bitter fruit of that. It's like, well, man, like why are all these evangelical Christians like voting for ideologues and like authoritarian people? I'm like, we were primed for this. Like, this is not there's like, we should be a little bit surprised about like how bad it is.
Yeah.
But we also should not be surprised that like, well, from the mid 20th century onwards, like people bought into this idea that bigger is better, spectacle is better. Like, quite frankly, Lou would say propaganda is a great way to mobilize people.
Yeah.
So like we were actually formed for this type of, I say we, this universal we, people were formed for this. But if you prioritize quality, relationship, discipleship, particularly diversity, like you're going to be prepared for seeing some of these things for what they are. And I think this, leads into what you're talking about in terms of food and beverage, like wine, right? I on my dad's side of the family, there's winemakers, and my dad's family ran an Italian restaurant in East Vancouver for years, and so I come from a family of restaurateurs and winemakers, and my dad and I brew beer in his garage and that sort of thing. And yeah, like if you actually start to dig into the history of some of the things that are like staple food and beverage now, the more you realize that accidents, right, produce some of the things that we love now. Like my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you're probably more informed on this than me, but like Guinness beer was discovered by accident because they like I think there was something about like they overcooked some of the ingredients.
Okay.
And so then they were like, well, we'll just use this for ourselves and we'll save the good, barley or wheat or whatever, for like the customers. So initially it was like, this was supposed to be a bad batch because it was burnt. And then they like, drank and they're like, oh,
this is the good stuff.
We have something here.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know, maybe that's just the stuff of legend, but like, the accident, the experimentation, the locality of things. I mean, that is where the magic is.
Right.
And sometimes mass produced stuff will do, like sometimes, just a run of the mill lager on the right day in the right place is exactly what was needed. But most of the time, I think the things that really resonate are things that are so particular and it's qualitative that it may not meet the efficiency and speed criteria, but it meets another criteria, and I think a better one.
Wow.
I mean, I could talk about Scotch. I lived in Scotland for 4 years and touring distilleries. I mean, oh man, it's so hard not to get romantic about whiskey distilling.
Well, even just the winemaking, but I think what it boils down to, like you said, is this locality that like we were meant to be in a location. We are meant to be part of a community, and whether that's community, like I'm in Flagstaff, you're up in Canada, my geography of Canada is horrible. So forgive me. I don't,
that's okay.
I'm a,
we're near
American.
Seattle. Vancouver's near Seattle.
Seattle. Yeah. That's right. Okay. And so, but we're meant to live in that particularity, and wine and beverage and food is supposed to be meant to live in that particularity. And yes, it is easy. And I shop at Fry's, I shop at Kroger, right? Like, because it's convenient and like budgetary wise, like there's a lot to take in. Like it's easy to romanticize the particularity, to only go to the, farmers markets to buy local or, eat what is good for, well raised. But like, there's a lot of wrestling and nuance to do that too, right? That it assumes a level of privilege and a level of locale that not everybody has access to, right? You and I live in winter climates where we can't get, there's not fresh vegetables growing. Whereas if you're in Santa Monica, the Santa Monica farmers market's year round, and there is a plethora of beauty at every farmer's market.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's right. Because on the one hand, like we can talk about locality, we can talk about, quality and just the value of it. And on the other hand, it can be very easy to miss the privilege in that, right? And you're right. Like I'm a theology professor. I don't make a lot of money, so it's like I love, slow food, and I love, the artisan stuff, all that. And I'd love to buy all organic food, but I can't afford to all the time. And I've got like, a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and Vancouver has an insanely high cost of living.
Right.
And, it's one of those things where, and I acknowledge like the privilege that I have and even how hard it can be sometimes. So there is this other reality that we're wrestling with, is like the scale of the predicament that we're in is the way I realize or phrase this is like, it really sucks that we live in a world where people have to pay extra in order to consume food that doesn't hurt their bodies.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I'm kind of that person, because like I've had Crohn's disease for,
Hmm.
21 years. And so it would be better for my body if I ate all organic and, avoided certain things and whatever. But like the price tag that comes attached to that is very high, and we just can't do it. So it's like, well, okay, this is it. But then those moments that you do get, right? And
Yeah.
and this is the beauty of food. Like, um, it's not the price tag, and it's not even just like all the process that went into it. It's the people and it's the moment. Like some
Yeah.
of the best meals you have, I don't know that it's necessarily like the taste. I think it's the context that really informs the taste as well. Like those, so, yeah, I could, if I had the money, I'd love to buy, a 20-year-old whiskey that's, cask strength and whatever.
Right.
But I've had blends with pals,
Yeah.
right, at the right time, in the right place, and that dram tasted sweeter than anything I could have spent, $1,000 or more on.
For sure.
Right. So this is the kind of, I don't know, mercurial nature of what we're talking
Right.
about.
Yeah, because when I have that 20-year-old scotch, or even maybe say a 16-year-old scotch, I'm less prone to actually share it with others because I want, like,
Yeah.
versus, a Johnny Walker Black or whatever, or a Monkey Shoulder, a blend that's good, like, oh yeah, let's come over, let's drink, we'll, but also getting the right people, like we had some friends over on Saturday. They were part of a wine club here, and they had a Chateauneuf du Pape, and they're like, hey, we know Claire and Andrew love good food and good wine. Like, they'll enjoy this wine if we drink it together. So like, hey, can we do dinner? We'll bring the wine. And so I cooked. And so I, figuring out what we wanted to have. And, I made a tarte filette, which was fun. Like this French peasant dish with just lots of gooey, stinky cheese. Like,
oh man, dude, I love that type of French food.
Yeah. But with the Chateauneuf du Pape, it was great. And they had some elk steaks because, we're in hunting country. And so like we had elk steaks and tarte filette and Chateauneuf du Pape, and we may have started with some Burgundy because I had some bottles of Burgundy from,
oh man,
like, again, I get privileged because I get to taste and sell good wine, which means I get to drink way better wine that is above my pay grade, that I should never drink, and so like, again, like it's the perk of the job.
Yeah.
But like you said, it was the quality of the relationship. And so, it wasn't the food was great and the food was what brought us together, but it was the quality and the friendship more so than the food. I think we could have had a fun night if we had that Chateauneuf du Pape with pizza.
Yep.
Because the quality of friendships. And we started talking about, oh, we want to go to this restaurant in Phoenix. It's one of the best restaurants. Like, hey, could we do it all for, in November? Like, we could save up, because we're going to drop way too much money on a dinner like this. But like, could we share it together so like the four of us could have an experience that is really fun?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And like, even that process of saving up
Right.
for that experience makes it all the more meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I want to start talking about one of my favorite meals that I had. I was in Strasbourg for my friend Jake's wedding, and we went to a restaurant that was like traditional Alsatian food. And Strasbourg is this really interesting place in France because it's actually been part of Germany. And and so it's this really interesting mix of like German and French culture, and it like it also comes out in the food and baking.
Yeah.
So my friend Jake is like, Mike, you got to order this. I'm like, sweet. So I order it, and it's like a mini Dutch oven with just all sorts of melted cheeses with I think it was like, I'm pretty sure it was like pig knuckles that had been just kind of slow cooked.
Oh gosh.
With a side of potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just like, take me out of that restaurant in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Because this is so rich.
Right.
Like it was literally like a medium-sized Dutch oven filled with cheese and pork. And then, potatoes. And I felt like I tasted that culture. Like it was
Mhm.
just, where else would you have this? It was so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, you just mentioned French food and like my mind just
Right.
went to
Oh,
that. So I just
no.
needed to
Yep.
rave
Well,
about it.
Alsatian Rieslings, and the wine region on Alsace just produces some beautiful Rieslings and wines. And, I drink above my pay grade. So like just
Yeah.
enjoying Alsatian Rieslings or this Alsatian late harvest Pinot Gris,
Ooh,
like, anyway.
come on.
Come on. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, you get a spoiled palate, right? Like I
Yeah.
got a spoiled palate living in Scotland, and I had
Right.
moving back to Canada. I had to lower my standards because, like, I'd go to Costco, which had an alcohol section.
Yeah.
So I'd always swing by and be like, Lagavulin 16 for 40 quid, 40 British pounds, which is like at that time it would have been $80 Canadian.
Yeah.
Right now, that would go for 130, 140, 150.
Yeah. Right.
I got so spoiled. Like,
right.
And so now I really had to lower my standards. But part of the fun is like finding affordable stuff that tastes amazing that should be more expensive than it actually is.
Yep.
So we have bougie palates, Andrew. We can't help ourselves.
We can't. No. But we still enjoy the table. Like it's not about the bougie food per se.
It sometimes
is. It sometimes is. No,
but not always.
Because with Super Bowl, I was drinking bougie beer because if I'm going to drink beer, I want something really well made and handcrafted. And I have a beer guy that just has the best selection and the unique selection. And I ask him, I'm like, hey, what should I drink? And he's like, here. And I'm like, great, done. Like,
yep. Those are great friends to have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think we could keep going forever and ever and on into eternity talking about food and
yeah,
all sorts of things. But I know for the interest of time and other places, we need to wrap up. So some fun questions to wrap up.
Okay.
What's one food you refuse to eat?
It's not because like I myself am opposed to it, but I literally cannot eat butternut squash without throwing up. Like I'm not like, I don't go into anaphylactic shock.
Right.
I just like, I get immediately unwell.
Okay.
And I just throw up. And at one time I got a new job and one of my bosses invited me over to his family's for dinner, and his wife very kindly made butternut squash ravioli.
Oh gosh.
I did not have the heart to turn that down.
No.
Because it's like, is he picky? I didn't want them to think I was picky. And I don't actually have like, it's not going to kill me.
No.
It's just going to make me really sick. Yeah. So I ate all that ravioli. And then the kids were like, let's go to Menchie's for ice cream. Do you have Menchie's in the States?
No.
Oh, it's kind of like build your own sundae, but fancier.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I'm actually a bit lactose intolerant. So I was like, let's go. And like, I'm like, you put me in front of a tap of ice cream with choice of fixins, I'm gonna go. Like, you take this horse to that ice cream water, it's gonna drink.
Yep, for sure.
So driving home after that day, I made a pact with myself in the car that if I could make it home without throwing up in the car, then that would be a win.
For sure.
So didn't expect that answer, did you?
No, it was great. I love it. So the other end of the spectrum, what's one of the best things you've ever eaten? Obviously we just heard about this Alsatian cheese and pork dish, but.
Oh, yeah. Best things I've eaten. I think there were a lot of things, but I'll say, my nonna, which is Italian for grandma, when we would spend time with her, and we'd stay at her house, I'd wake up in the morning and there was a certain smell that if I smelt that, I knew we were going to have an amazing meal that night. So nice. It was typically like olive oil, garlic, onions, probably ground beef, and tomatoes. And it was a mixture of some or all of those things that if I smelt that, I knew something good was coming. And so, whether that was like hand rolled gnocchi, with red sauce, or like veal scallopini, lasagna, panzerotti, which is like what pizza pockets try to be, but never will be. Yeah, it's those ones are probably the most memorable meals. And then a version of that when I visited, family in Southeast Italy, and there were a few meals there. Panzerotti is like probably some of the top ones. But there's also, friends that my wife and I have where we'll save up, and every year just before the fall comes back, we'll go to different restaurants. And like, oh man, we went to a Peruvian restaurant in Vancouver and we had ceviche and
yes.
octopus and brazino.
Yes, preach.
And like, there was like a mezcal cocktail that I had with it. And oh man, it was great. Like Afghan food. So yeah, I mean, there's so many, but my Nona is probably his top.
See, your Nona ruined you. It's her fault. You're bougie.
Yeah, she did. But the funny thing is too, is like, maybe this is a good place to end.
Yeah.
Is one of the things that I learned from her is that like, there's no real set recipe.
No. It's
only like the best sauces are made over a day, and there are approximations.
Yeah.
And even actually when we were in Italy, our family's like, oh, make us something North American. So my brother and I decided to do like pancakes and waffles. So we got all the ingredients, and then we're like, where are your measuring cups? And they're like, what are measuring cups? Like, measuring cups.
Yeah.
The things you use to measure how much you put in, they're like, we don't have those.
Right.
We don't use those for cooking.
Right.
And so we actually found a baby bottle that helped us measure the ingredients. But it was like, yeah, in a way, like my Nona ruined me for my palate, but also like taught me so much about how to do food, because I love to cook. And at one point I wanted to be a chef, but I think it's better I turned out a theologian.
Yeah.
But like that ethos has just like formed me from the ground up. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael. Always
Thank
a joy.
you. Oh, this was great. This is so fun. I'm kind of jealous actually of your podcast. I have like podcast envy because you get to talk about these things all the time.
I know,
I
but
mean, I like talking about what I talk about, but
it's, we each to his own passions, and, someday, hopefully we all share a great meal together. And
amen.
Just, if people are interested in learning more about your work, where can they find you?
Oh yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I have a podcast called Personalist Manifestos. We're on Substack. It's just personalistmanifestos.substack.com. I'm on Instagram. I do theology stuff, and also I tell jokes. A lot of them are dad jokes. It's just mchlmorelli@gmail.com, or just mchlmorelli. I don't know why I said Gmail. Those are probably the prime points you can find out about me. Yeah. For
sure. And maybe we'll do a podcast someday on the tortures of parent drop-off.
And how it
brings out the hell of everybody.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm down. Let's do it.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time. Bye.